Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Hey, I told you guys I would do this review eventually. We unboxed this guitar a couple of weeks ago, and I've had a lot of people try to buy this from me, but I've been, turning away anything that's not a full price offer because I wanted to get some time to document this thing. And we had just reviewed that 61 style SG a couple of days ago, and I told you guys, we'll talk about the other models in this particular episode. So this right here is a 1971 Gibson SG Deluxe. Now you might be confused. Deluxe and Les Paul territory means you got the little mini humbuckers. This does not have mini humbuckers. It has full-size humbuckers, but you're also going to notice, we've got a Les Paul style pickguard on this, stock from the factory. So now we don't have to argue between, do you want bat wing guard? Do you want the small guard? We get Les Paul guard SG. Okay. And it's a top routed SG. Now, the top route era for SGs, generally between like 1970 to 1972, it was very small. It was just simply a cost savings feature. They don't have to route the back out. They can just route the top. It's just as easy as a melody maker for them to make. And this is kind of, slightly the beginning of the Norlin era. I mean, I think it's officially Norlin in 1969. So things were going to change. They were just trying to figure out what they wanted to do. And the SG is one of those models that changed so much in its evolution. So let's do a quick recap here. 1961, we have something that kind of looks like this. Now, granted, this is an SG custom, and we're going to mainly focus on standards today, but it would have a sideways vibrola unit. Eventually, we would move into the ebony block, into the maestro vibrola, into just a solid stop bar. They would look like this, with the short pickguard style right here. And this body shape was first introduced in 1961, and it eventually got the name SG in 63 once the Les Paul contract was over. But the next biggest change, besides, other very small spec differences, things like how the heel is joined to the body, the biggest, most visual thing from the outside is our pickguard in 1966. That's what they call the large guard era, aka the bat wing. It's what you saw Jack Black use in the School of Rock. So you see the large guard variety from 66 to about 71 on the standards, but you gotta remember, every year there were small incremental changes that varied it from the original 60s design, so it just, diminishes the value, and there's a lot different, but we're just kind of generalizing today, so it's not a super heavy topic, because again, the heel types have changed. Some of them have these really big heels in the late 60s, and then other ones are smaller. Then obviously things like the nut width changed. And in 69, we have the introduction of the volute on the back of the headstock. But pretty much the next time SGs changed radically was at the end of 71 into 1972 for the SG standard. That's when they kind of looked like this. So this thing right here is an SG Deluxe. It ranks slightly below the SG standard. It's still a pretty high-end guitar, and in many ways it might even be better because these have patent number T-tops in here, whereas the SG standards, depending on the year, sometimes you can still find these, but generally you'll have the new tarback pickups. And honestly, if I had to choose between tarbacks and patent number T-tops, I would go the T-tops all day long. But obviously, these things were top routed instead of being back routed. Sometimes you can find transitional standards that will have this. I mean, it's kind of hard to describe, but basically the Deluxe is a top-routed version of the standards. They won't have the harmonica bridges yet. A lot of these had Bigsbys on them. Not all of them, though, so if you don't like the Bigsby, there is a way around that. But the biggest thing to note is the body style. So the Deluxe went away after these standards kind of came out. Like, it's really blurred. It's hard to get in-depth information, but it all comes down to the horn shape. You see how this thing is very blocky looking? Like, it doesn't have as much of a contour. Here's a good example, the SG reissue, how pointed that is versus how blunt this is. Especially take note of the swoop. See this thing? It has no swoop at all. It's just a blocky thing. Whereas on the more desirable SGs, you see this whole cut in right here? It was very stylistic. Now, the whole reason that they didn't do that, cost-saving features, less time to have to shape the stuff. but you'll even see it on the sides. Like this has a big carve in right here, whereas this is just tiny little stuff. It was enough to make it still look like an SG, but not have too much SG. That's why there's a lot of hate for 70s SGs. They're not as stylistically pleasing. However, I really like the 70s SGs because they have an interesting style to them. I mean, heck, believe it or not, this is the exact same guitar that I reviewed Halloween a couple of years ago, the Hornless SG. Somebody chopped the horns off of it because they didn't like it for some reason. But other models of SGs you can find in this time were like the Melody Makers. They were kind of towards the late 60s, but you can also find a guitar that looks very similar to this that has mini humbuckers, as well as a P90 variation called the SG Pro. You also had the SG 100 series, 100, 200, 250. Those things were maple bodies. I'm not a big fan of them, but you can check out this review and demo if you want to learn a little bit more. And to be honest with you guys, I don't really like the top routed SGs as much as I do the back routed ones. Once they step into that standard configuration, those are just my favorite ones. Now granted, they've got the tiny nut width, so if you don't like that, they're not going to be for you, but you can find them in ebony fretboards or rosewood fretboards, and there's something magical to those. And maybe that's just because it was the very first SG I had ever played, and I have some fond memories of hunting down a couple of those and a couple of them that got gotten away. But for me, it's all about that. So I hope that, gives you a brief rundown of the SGs. Nothing super technical today. Just glossing over the 60s into the early 70s of the SGs. I mean, into the 80s, not too much change. They did become side output jack models for a while. I really like those things too. And then you kind of got birthed into the 90s era, into the 2000s, and they pretty much just started reissuing the general shape that everybody liked. If Gibson would reissue blocky horned top routed SGs, that would make me happy. Like maybe for the 50th anniversary, we might see something like that. That would be kind of cool. But to learn more about this beast, let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench and take an individual look at its parts and specs, because this is a pretty nice example, except for I'm a little bit scared. I thought I bought this as all original, but looking at the bottom of the case, there's a tag that says 72 Gibson SG Deluxe. I'm thinking it's going to more so be a 71. We'll find out when we look on the pot codes. It says Walnut Bigsby, 7980 PUs. So that scares me. The pickups might have been replaced in this, but I guess it wouldn't be that bad if we had like a Tim Shaw and a T-top in here, but we'll just have to find out. Let's go to the bench. All right. Unfortunately, this thing took a turn for the worse. I initially thought, great condition, all original example. No, that's not exactly what this is, but it still is a nice example. But I do have some disclosures to do now that I've actually taken it apart to look at it. The case was correct. Somebody has stolen the original pickups out of here, but they were nice enough to leave behind a 1980 T-top and a 1979 T-top. Now, I know earlier I was saying patent number. I meant to say patent sticker. There's a slight difference. Like, as far as they sound, yeah, there might be a slight difference, but they're generally about the same. But the patent stickers look like this. They have the water slide decal just like the PAFs. It says patent number and then all that stuff. It's kind of confusing because they both have a number, but patent number normally refers to when it's embossed into the base plate here. So what is the price difference between a late 70s T-top and an early 70s with the sticker? About $100 or so on a set, sometimes a little bit more. It really comes down to those things are more valuable because there were less of those made and people are trying to restore those guitars or put them in normal ones. Both still very expensive pickups. But here you can see how this thing is routed. You can see the brown paint in each of these pickup cavities, and you can see how they do this little channel route from here with this really long router bit in order to let the pickup wires go through into where they wired it up here. But these guys are straight up mahogany bodies. How many pieces? I do believe it's one piece. Apparently mahogany slabs back then were readily available. I mean, most Gibson guitars are one-piece bodies in this era. I keep seeing that on people who are selling deluxes. One-piece body, rare, rare, rare. No, it's not. Late 70s backs, they're just one piece. Now, they might be referring to like the pancake body construction, but that's something completely different. But they were still one-piece slabs this way. They weren't multi-piece like we see today. But this thing's looking good. But the other modification is, this originally would have had an ABR1 bridge, and I didn't see it. It looks like somebody took the ABR1 bridge out and installed Nashville-style studs. So that is a non-reversible modification. So what was probably happening is this guitar was experiencing post lean, and they're like, ah, crap, my guitar has some post lean. It's the late 70s. What am I to do? You put in the then new Nashville style bridge. I mean, this bad boy came out around 1975. It was first introduced when the Nashville plant opened. That's why they call it the Nashville style bridge. But you can see this is actually a 70s or 80s era correct part. So originally made by Schaller in Germany. So my best guess here is something was happening. They swapped out the bridge and the pickups at the same time. Maybe something went wrong with those. So now I'm starting to think, is this actually 72? Because what I didn't tell you yet about the 72s is they're extra special. They have Gibson embossed covers. Let me show you something real cool here. SG Customs were done up like this too. You can see the ABR1 bridge right there, the gold and Bigsby. But if you really zoom in, the 72s actually get Gibson embossed pickup covers, and it's so cool, especially when they're in gold like that. I mean, these are some very strange looking SG Customs, but a lot of models, including Les Paul Customs and these SG Deluxes and various other ones, would have that embossed one, but that only lasted for 1 year in 1972, some late 71s as well. Because apparently some dealers were complaining it made the pickups position specific. Like you can't use that cover for a bridge because then the Gibson logo would be upside down. I don't know if there's any truth to that. That's just what I've been reading for all these years. But this is a Bigsby. That's what the damage looks like after a Bigsby has been sitting on the guitar for a while. So 4 screw holes. So if you ever see one of these that has a stop bar tailpiece installed and you got holes here, it's because it was originally a Bigsby model. You can see your grounding tab right here that the Bigsby sits on to ground that off. So the way Bigsbys work for these is you put the ball end of the string right here and then you wrap it around this post underneath this tension bar and then it goes on to the bridge. And yeah, I could see how that might cause an ABR1 to, do some leaning. Now that sounds really easy to set up, right? It's a big pain in the butt. It's so hard to get these things on there. Bigsby does sell a spoiler system that connects onto that, and then you put the strings right through here. It just kind of grabs the ball end of the string, and then you can easily put it into place. Those things are worth every penny. But you use this arm, and then there is a spring right here that it compresses in order to give you that nice light warble effect. If you ever tried a modern day Bigsby and thought it was too stiff, sometimes it just takes a good 40 years for the spring to get loosened in and be a little bit nicer. That's what I've heard anyways. Now, if you're ever curious if your early 70s Bigsby Gibson is original to the guitar, just look right there. It should say Gibson on it. Bigsby made them for Gibson. But anyways, here's our controls. We have witch hat knobs on here, which hopefully we'll find out if they're original when we do the blacklight test. But you've got a toggle switch right here for obviously selecting your pickups. Let's go ahead and grab our readings. We should be in that 7.5 area. Let's find out. 7.41 in the bridge. Neck position, 7.37. Yep, those are definitely within spec. Middle just for fun, 3.69. Yep, everything seems to be good. So now let's find out the moment of truth. What do our pot codes say? Oh, those little rascals. Yep, somebody stole the Gibson pickups out of here. It looks like the pots were made the 15th week of 1972, so yeah, this pretty much almost guaranteed would have had the Gibson embossed covers originally on these. So not all the wiring is original because obviously our pickups have been taken out. Now it looks like somebody just shielded them off on the exterior, but you still have the braided wiring right here and then the other one. So at least whoever did the job seemed to be competent in wiring and all that. And the pots and everything else are looking original to me. So newer bridge with an irreversible mod with the studs in the body and newer pickups that are still vintage. I mean, value-wise, it's about the same as advertising it as anyways. These are more so players grade models, so people don't care about stuff like this rather than on like a Sparkle Top Deluxe or something. But let's go ahead and check out that pickguard. So this doesn't look half bad without a pickguard, to be honest, but it's just like a Les Paul one, but it doesn't use a bracket. So normally the bracket screw would be like right here and then it secures to the edge of the body. This just goes straight to the top, but not exactly just straight to the top. So it's got these little plastic grommet pieces. Now, I'm not sure if these were at one point in time rubber and they've just hardened, but these are a hard plastic material. You can see how they've sat on top of the finish for so many years. Those are there to raise the pickguard up. That way it meets flush with the pickup rings and it's not, down, because that doesn't quite look as classy when the pickup rings are a little bit more proud than the pickguard. So those are there strictly for cosmetic reasons. But moving on from our mahogany body, let's check out our mahogany neck with rosewood fretboard. So here's another thing that's different between the 60s and 70s SGs. You get these small block inlays. Again, it's the first SG I ever had experience with, so I like them, but I could see how somebody who grew up in the 60s could see these as, inferior to the originals. It's just kind of a cool look. But these are 22 fret models. Something to know about the SG Pros is they actually have a black and cream binding, so they have a cool multicolored nib going on. That's something that not everybody knows about that one. Now, as far as the fret style, it's not quite low-wide like a lot of the frets are. They have a little bit more of a crowned height to them, but they're by no means jumbos or anything. But we should have the standard 12-inch radius on these with a 24 3/4 inch scale length. But now the ever so important nut width. All right, that's a skinny one, 1.59 inches. A lot of the guitars we review are like 1.69, 1.7 to put that into reference, and then only 2 by the 12th. A lot of other guitars can be up to like 2.1 inches, but generally they're like 2.05. That first fret neck depth, we're rocking 0.81 and 0.96 by the 12th. So that's why I like these SGs. Sure, they're a little bit skinnier up top, but they're pretty rounded. But up here, by the 12th fret, they get such a big neck to them. Like, this isn't quite the same neck as you find on the SG standards that get really big. I think that's simply due to the construction here. Those SG standards, they're birthed in that 73 when they start to sculpt the horn a little bit more, and then they're a little bit less clunky at the heel. But it's a very similar style neck, so a little skinnier, but then gets a little bit wider and a little bit chunkier. Here's a look at that neck profile at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. You can see just how wide it gets, and it almost transitions from like a C shape to more of a D shaped neck. As far as the headstock goes, here's what that looks like. You can see the mahogany neck and the truss rod channel right here, but our truss rod is looking in perfect shape. Now, unfortunately, our truss rod cover, while original, has been damaged. Both of the loops have been cracked, but thankfully you got just enough on these things that it'll still secure to the top and you don't really notice it. And of course, the headstock, it's got scratches because it's been used for the past many of moons. But the lacquer is still relatively pretty clean. It has a little bit of a yellow hint to it, but not a whole lot. As compared to many other guitars of a similar age, it's definitely aged very mildly. And hey, Grover tuners with a little bit of a secret that we'll look at on the back. But anyways, now let's go ahead and flip it over to the back. It's being a top-routed SG, we don't have too much to talk about here, but just look at the condition of this thing. It was lovingly played. It's not mint. It's not even close to that. Very good might be even pushing it by my standards. It's got some light nicks and dings, it's got some scratches, but as compared to many other SG Deluxe from this era, it's nice. I really like the wood grain on this one. That walnut stain's not too dark. It's just a cool looking guitar here. Now, you might be curious about the heel joint on this one. So this has a very small heel right here, but it's rather clunky and boxy where it meets the body. It's very common for lines to form where the neck joins to the body and whatnot, and you can kind of see just how much of the neck is standing up proud right here, so that makes these guitars feel a little bit different. Not quite as strange as the SG 100s though, because those guys almost have a 0 neck pitch to them, and that's why those are a bit strange. But these, they have a little bit to them. But you do have some contours on the back. Again, not as much as a 60s variant, but a little bit. Again, a bit more blockier. Strap button down here and right here. Now the strap buttons are also a replaced part on this guitar. Now the neck itself actually appears to be in decent shape. Appears to be a 3-piece mahogany neck. So we were talking about the bodies, generally 1 piece. When it comes to the necks, you got the multi-pieces. When it comes to tops of like Les Pauls, you get the multi-pieces. And again, Les Pauls at this point in time would have the pancake body construction. But moving up here, you got a couple of nicks and dings. Nothing too crazy that you really feel, but if you're very particular about your necks, do not buy this one because you do have a couple of light dings. And there's our beautiful volute. No headstock brakes on this one. That's the other thing. Almost every 70s SG Got his headstock broken. It's hard to find them not repaired, but we'll check that out under blacklight here in a minute. But now, the secret of the tuners. So there's a small period in time when Grover made them Gibson branded. You can see this part of the tuner is Gibson embossed. So I always thought those Grovers were pretty cool. You don't see these things very often. I'm sure you could sell a set of these just on their own, probably for what, $250, something like that. But our serial number, 626074. Very nice. So this is definitely a 1972 constructed guitar. So let's check this out under blacklight. Everything's looking good on the headstock here. You can see you got a couple of dings into the finish. That's why they glow a little bit differently. But always be careful on these 70s SGs in the headstock area. Very prone to breaks, cracks, and repairs. Probably because people are just so rough on these things. Like you can see a little bit of a stand wear mark right there. And a little one on that side. There you can see those various nicks and dings on the back of the neck as well. A little bit of finish rub, especially along the edges here. Nothing too crazy. Doesn't look like we have any on the side that you see. Back at the body, looking pretty good here. Man, I really love blacklight tests. The way they just show all those little nicks and dings, that is so hard to show you. In regular lighting situations, they really show up here, especially that one right there on the side. That's probably the worst ding on the whole guitar. Looks like another one right there by the strap button that broke through. I suppose that'd be a pertinent area to look as well. The 70s ones, they don't have as much trouble with the heel breaks as the original 60s though. But it does still happen. But our body is looking extra nice on this one. I suppose it might be possible those witch hats have been replaced. I think normally don't they glow? I forget. I'll have to do a little bit more reading on that. Mainly because I don't run into witch hat knobs too often in my guitars that I normally buy. But everything is looking great on this one. Our last spec to capture is the weight, a little under 8 pounds, 7 pounds, 14.2 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. All right, here we go. Now that I have it on a strap and I've really felt the neck and played it a bit, it is very similar to the SG standard necks of the era. They're very thin, and if you have big hands like I do, sometimes that can feel very crowded and not comfortable. But if you have smaller hands, this is sometimes the answer for a very comfortable guitar for someone. That's the reason why, post 65 on like 335s and other similar guitars, some guys, they don't buy anything past 65 into the early 70s until they switch them back. It's not that one is good or bad, it just comes down to personal preference. As far as neck dive on this example, it's pretty balanced. I mean, you got the Bigsby, so that adds some weight to it, so it'll sit the way you want it to. The Bigsby, yeah, it stays in tune okay. I always have to tweak it, so don't do any dive bombs and you'll be okay. So let's start with this neck pickup. It's nice and mellow. Now we'll try that middle position. Very vintage sounding. It still has that mellow tone, but just a little bit more bite to it. And now we'll try the bridge. I'd say it sounds pretty good if that's what you're looking for. This would be a really nice jazzy guitar. I mean, despite not looking like a jazzy guitar. Now we'll try some distortion. Bridge pickup. Sounds a bit microphonic. Now that we know all about this 1972 Gibson SG Deluxe, what are my final thoughts on this thing? This is definitely one of those guitars you want to try before you buy. Like, go to any vintage guitar shop. Many dealers will have a guitar that has the skinny nut width, so you can at least try it to see if you like these things. It can be something you can just get adjusted to, but if you're buying like a guitar and this is the only guitar you're gonna have for a while, yeah, definitely make sure you like these skinny nuts. But when you get the right one that feels right to your hands and has like the right neck shape to it, they can be quite magical at the same time. Is it my favorite SG I've ever played? No, but it's just kind of the era. You either like these things or you don't. I much prefer the regular Les Paul standards that have the stop bar tailpiece variety rather than the Bigsby's. But you can't deny these things look pretty cool for the 70s. Like, even if you're a 60s SG purist, I think we can all agree there is a certain classy element to these top-routed SGs. I mean, normally you think a pickguard on top with mounted electronics on a Gibson, low-end budget stuff. But this thing pulls it off so well with that Les Paul style pickguard, all this fancy stuff on top of it. I think it's the witch hat knobs that make this look as fancy as it does. And then when you even get the embossed pickup covers on some of these, that's when it really becomes cool. So, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed checking this guitar out with me today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care. As always, if you're interested in being the next owner of one of these demo guitars, you can check them out on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. There's some links in the description.